welcome back to Grief Inspired. My name is Catherine McNulty, and here on the Grief Inspired channel, we talk about grief and loss and how you can move forward and be inspired by your grief. So today we're talking about anticipatory grief. We're going to talk about what it is, what causes it, how it shows up, and what you can do about it. So what is anticipatory grief? Anticipatory grief is the feelings of loss, sadness, worriedness, concern about the future that you would experience as a pre-death grief, meaning before your loved one has gone. So what causes it? Well, what causes it is the sudden awareness or the eventual awareness that your loved one is not going to live forever, that there is going to be a time in this world where you may be alive and they aren't. And so what causes this anticipatory grief feeling is that you're actually starting to grieve. And for many of us, we haven't had a lot of grief experience. So it may show up in ways that we don't know what to do with. This could be because someone got a terminal diagnosis. Maybe it's someone that's younger that's unexpected, but now you know, based on the situation that they're in, that they are not going to be living a whole lot longer. Maybe it's your aging parents, right? Everyone on this planet at one point or another will die. So as our parents get older, that reality will start to set in. And oftentimes it is associated and kind of linked with an illness as they start to deteriorate in age. It could be any type of pending loss. So you could have anticipatory grief just when you get the realization that, oh my gosh, my parents are getting older. I'm getting older too. I'm not going to be here forever. These are things that not everybody thinks about all the time. And when you suddenly get the awareness, maybe it's because you know of someone else who has lost someone and you're like, oh my gosh, that could happen to me too. These are all things that can evoke anticipatory grief. So let's talk for a minute about how anticipatory grief shows up. If you're asking yourself, am I experiencing anticipatory grief? Is your loved one still alive? Do you know that there is a pending death? And are you feeling unusually sad? More sad than typical? Are you worried? Are you experiencing a whole flood of emotions that seem to be new for you? This might be your first experience with grief. And if it is, hang on, you are in anticipatory grief. You may be experiencing feelings of numbness or disbelief that, oh my gosh, there is going to be a time when they are not here with me. And that can create some shock and numbness. There may be anger associated with their pending loss. Maybe it's not fair that they've gotten cancer or that this has happened to them, because oftentimes the people that seem to die earliest are the ones who don't deserve it. Isn't that always the case? There could be anxiety or fear that's showing up for you. Maybe you're concerned about the future. What's going to happen? What's going to happen between now and their death? Or what's going to happen beyond their death? How are you going to continue to live without them in your life? These things are all genuine concerns and things that will cause anticipatory grief. So what can you do when it happens to you? I think the first thing to realize is that anticipatory grief is grief, and grief is an emotional response to loss. So when you know that you are going to have a loss of any kind, grief will result. And if you're not familiar with grief, it can be very overwhelming. One of the things that we talk around here about all of the time, if you haven't watched some of my other videos, is that you have to get your grief out. So if you start experiencing anticipatory grief, the normal response for most people, and this is something that you can pay attention to, if you start to withdraw, right? You found out that your loved one is going to pass, and it might be in the not too distant future. It can make you sad. You can start to withdraw. Maybe you have mood swings, right? So getting your grief out, meaning getting your emotions, your feelings out of your mind, out of your heart, out of your body in whatever way you can is healthy. So the things that you can do, we always think it's a good idea to talk about it, right? The natural tendency is maybe just to go within, be quiet, isolate ourselves. So finding somewhere safe that you can talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it with other people, you can journal about it. You can write about it. You can write in a journal. You can write on paper. You can shred it. You can burn it. You can tear it up if you're worried someone else will see it. You can talk into your phone and record it so that you can hear it and hear yourself talk about your own emotions. It's all very, very healing. The thing about anticipatory grief, though, and I work with so many people who have already lost their loved ones, is that there is an opportunity when you're experiencing anticipatory grief because they are not gone yet, because they are still here. What that means is that there are things that you can do to give yourself some more control, right? One of the grief-inspired mantras is you have more control than you think you do. And specifically with anticipatory grief, you do have more control than you think you do. You can't control that they're not going to live forever, but you can control what happens between now that you know, and their death. So what does that mean? Maybe it means saying the things that you need to say, being sure that you've told them how much their life has impacted you, how much you love them. There is an opportunity for forgiveness there. If you need to be forgiven or if you need to forgive them, this is an opportunity that you do not want to miss. It can give you the opportunity to spend quality time with them. I work with so many people who have experienced sudden loss. And when there's a sudden loss and you don't know that the death is going to happen, there isn't anything you can do. And you don't get that time. And I think that's why it's so tragic and why it seems to hurt so much more. So you can have an opportunity to finish anything that's unfinished. And even if your loved one is in some sense incapacitated, it is very clearly documented and understood that even to the final moments of a loved one's death, their hearing is still intact. So maybe they can't speak. They will hear up until the very end. So you may be wondering, if you've been giving them morphine, they can still hear you. You can still talk to them. They can still feel the touch of your hand, the warmth of your hand, maybe a kiss on their cheek. They know that you are there no matter what state they're in. And that is an opportunity that you have. Anticipatory grief is something that can be very unsettling because we don't know what's going to happen next. That's why we call it pre-death grief. But it is starting to set the stage for what grief as they are gone, which is a separate and independent type of grief. It's setting the stage for what that is going to be like. So I want to encourage you, no matter what your emotions are right now, if you are in that numb, in that shock, and that disbelief that you can't believe this is happening, don't make yourself wrong for it. If you're feeling sad or guilty or angry, use the time that you have left to do what you can to change those things, to release the anger that you have, to say, I'm sorry, to forgive them for being imperfect, to forgive yourself for being imperfect. All of this can be really challenging, and you might not be prepared. So I want to encourage you to reach out. You can reach out to me at griefinspired@gmail.com if you need more support. during the process. There's my grief journal that you can use that will help with the process. You can get with other people in my school community that will help you through the process. Do not do this alone. There are things that you can do to help you move forward and be inspired by your grief, because one day after your loved one is gone, you will have the opportunity to look back on this precious, precious time that you have. Make the most of this time. Be inspired to do something to make your own grief and the rest of their life a little bit better. My heart goes out to you. I want to remind you that you are worthy and deserving of happiness, that you are not alone in this, and that if you need support, the Grief Inspired community is here to help.